The Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan border is 984 kilometers and runs from the tripoint with Uzbekistan to the tripoint with China. The border starts in the north at the tripoint with Uzbekistan in the Ferghana Valley. The border proceeds roughly westwards, with a sharp dike protrusion at the town of Chorku. It almost reaches the Kyrgyzstan reservoir. However, a thin strip of dike territory lies between the reservoir and the border. It then turns southwards near the dike enclave of Kyrgyzstan before turning sharply eastwards upon reaching the Turkestan range. The border then follows this range, and the Ali and Trans-Ali ranges, eastwards to the Chinese tripoint. There are two enclaves along the border, both dike enclaves within Kyrgyzstan. Russia had conquered Central Asia in the 19th century by annexing the formerly independent Khanates of Kokand and Khiva and the Emirate of Bukhara. After the Communists took power in 1917 and created the Soviet Union, it was decided to divide Central Asia into ethnically based republics in a process known as national territorial delimitation. This was in line with communist theory that nationalism was a necessary step on the path towards an eventually communist society, and Joseph Stalin's definition of a nation as being a historically constituted, stable community of people, formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifested in a common culture. The NTD is commonly portrayed as being nothing more than a cynical exercise in divide and rule, a deliberately Machiavellian attempt by Stalin to maintain Soviet hegemony over the region by artificially dividing its inhabitants into separate nations and with borders deliberately drawn so as to leave minorities within each state. Though indeed the Soviets were concerned at the possible threat of pan-Turkic nationalism, as expressed for example with the Basmachi movement of the 1920s, closer analysis informed by the primary sources paints a much more nuanced picture than is commonly presented. The Soviets aimed to create ethnically homogeneous republics. However, many areas were ethnically mixed their case and the Soviets were often forced to adjudicate between them, further hindered by a lack of expert knowledge and the paucity of accurate or up-to-date ethnographic data on the region. Furthermore, NTD also aimed to create viable entities with economic, geographical, agricultural and infrastructural matters also to be taken into account and frequently trumping those of ethnicity. The attempt to balance these contradictory aims within an overall nationalist framework proved exceedingly difficult and often impossible, resulting in the drawing of often tortuously convoluted borders, multiple enclaves and the unavoidable creation of large minorities who ended up living in the wrong republic. Additionally, the Soviets never intended for these borders to become international frontiers as they are today. NTD of the area along ethnic lines had been proposed as early as 1920. At this time, Central Asia consisted of two autonomous Soviet socialist republics. There were also the two separate successor republics of the Emirate of Bukhara and the Khanate of Khiva, which were transformed into the Bukhara and Khorasan People's Soviet Republics following the takeover by the Red Army in 1920. On the 25th of February 1924, the Politburo and Central Committee of the Soviet Union announced that it would proceed with NTD in Central Asia. The process was to be overseen by a special committee of the Central Asian Bureau, with 3 subcommittees for each of what were deemed to be the main nationalities of the region. With work then exceedingly rapidly, there were initial plans to possibly keep the Khorasan and Bukhara PSRs. However, it was eventually decided to partition them in April 1924, over the often vocal opposition of their communist parties. Originally the border was much longer, as the Uzbek SSR included the Khojan region as well as the rest of what is now Tajikistan as the Thai KSSR. The border assumed its current position in 1929. With Tajikistan gaining Khojan and becoming a full SSR, the Kara-Kyrgyz Autonomous Oblast was originally within the Russia SSR in October 1924, with borders matching those of modern Kyrgyzstan. In 1925 it was renamed the Kyrgyz Autonomous Oblast in May 1925, then became the Kyrgyz ASSR in 1926. And finally it became the Kyrgyz SSR in 1936. The boundary became an international frontier in 1991 following the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the independence of its constituent republics. There were tensions in the post-independence era over border delimitation and policing, and especially after an Islamic movement of Uzbekistan incursion into Kyrgyzstan from Tajik territory in 1999-2000. At present border delimitation is ongoing. Historical English language maps of the Kyrgyz SSR Tajik SSR border. Mid to late 20th century.